get straight into it. So, Charlie, we're going to talk about our top 5 edge rushers. Basically, me and Charlie have different lists. So I basically do my list. Me and Charlie for edge, we have exactly the same list with players. It's just we have different rankings, and I think we have our 5 are different. But number 1's Will Anderson. Is the number 1 edge prospect. I've heard a lot of teams have Tyree Wilson, who we'll talk about, as their number 1 guy, but Will Anderson is the best edge rusher in this class. You look at the production this guy had in college, 34.5 sacks, 2-time best edge rusher in, I forgot the specific award name, best edge rusher in college football, winner. This dude is a fantastic, fantastic player. When you look at Will Anderson, why is he just, to you, and maybe he's not, I guess I haven't really heard that opinion, to you, the out-and-out edge number 1 in this class?
This is the best player in this year's draft class. I completely agree with you. This guy is absolutely ridiculous. Best player in the class. I've got him graded really freaking high at a 97.62.
Wow. I have a 94.5.
This is our last year's, for me it was Kayvon Thibodeau. For a lot of people it was Aiden Hutchinson. This is Chase Young. This is an unbelievable prospect who his numbers were sort of down last year, and that came with 10 sacks and 17 tackles for loss. I don't understand how that could be a down year for this guy. In the run defense, this is the best player in this draft. From the edge, potentially even when you include the run stuffers at D tackle, this is the best run defender in the class. His hand use is excellent. The technique is just about perfect. He gets up and under 6'7", 6'8" tackles who are NFL bound at some point and just kind of bullies them. He knows exactly how to control his body, his hands, his movement, and there's nothing about this prospect that I think is a downside. This guy is good at everything.
I'm high on Will Anderson. I'm not as high as you are. Obviously, I think this guy is definitely the edge 1. I think Tyree Wilson over him is absurd. I think this dude's definitely the edge 1. There's no question there. I love Will Anderson. I think this guy, the profile he has athletically matches very well to Khalil Mack. When you look at being able to turn speed into power, there are just not many rushers who are able to do that. Like, this guy is a power rusher. Line him up on the outside, let him get inside. This guy is a pure edge rusher. Like, that's what he'll be drafted for. This guy will be drafted for the production he can give teams in terms of sacks. Like, you look at all these guys. Will Anderson is a sack getter. He gets to the quarterback and he sacks the quarterback. I don't agree with you with the best run defender. I think he's good. I don't think he's elite. I think he's good at run defending. I don't think that's what he'll be drafted for. But yeah, I mean, you look at his rip and push. He just has this profile that screams elite edge. The length as well, 34.5-inch arms. Like, that's exactly what you have, and it's actually a edge class that has very long arms. But that's what you want. Able to get up into that chest. His leverage ability is fantastic. Again, and I think it'll translate. Like, that's what I see. I think this guy will translate to the next level.
Very well.
It's funny because we always talk, the number 1 player in whatever position group we talk about is always the shortest conversation.
Yeah.
Because we know what we're getting. So we'll talk more about the next guy. But we'll go to the number 2 prospect who you have at number 4, actually. And that's Nolan Smith out of Georgia, who I have as my number 2 edge rusher. This guy, to me, is the best run stuffer in the class. A guy who very, obviously good for him. Weighed in at 238 as he was 235, which is very much small. This dude looks smaller on tape than he is, 6'2", 238. Obviously a senior. I mean, this guy is the best pure bendy edge rusher in the class. I think he has the most bend, the most finesse. This guy was fantastic on a Georgia front that for the past 2-3 years has, pumped out just, defensive monster after monster. I really like this guy. Ran a 4.39. That's ridiculous for an edge rusher, especially. It's not like he's a big dude. Obviously thinner than a Will Anderson and then like a Tyree Wilson. But this dude I think is fantastic. High motor. And you see, unlike a lot of the other edge rushers, this guy drops into coverage a lot. I was watching his tape against Missouri, like almost the beginning of that tape, half the snaps he was dropping into coverage. So you can kind of use him to fake him in as he's going to rush the passer and drop him inside to kind of fake out the quarterback and be using a lot of disguised zone coverages. So again, he offers a bunch of that. I think he is a little confined to what he'll play. I think this guy is ideally, I think, an outside linebacker.
Yeah, a 3-4 outside linebacker.
3-4 outside linebacker.
Likely.
I think he would, struggle a little bit at that pure edge rusher where I think Will Anderson is much better at. But again, and another thing I loved about this guy is you look at all the write-ups and the draft profiles, like his teammates respected him so much. They saw this dude as a leader. They saw this dude as a role model. Obviously, he's a senior this year, and they saw him as someone to look to in the locker room, which I love. That generally you can see translate into the NFL. But again, kind of like we'll talk about Will McDonald. Again, these are all edge rushers we'll get into. It's just when he tries to rip under an offensive lineman, if they can get that leverage, he's easily pushed down and knocked out of plays. So he doesn't have that beefiness that some of these other guys do. But I love Nolan Smith. I really, really like this guy. I think I have him valued at a top 20 pick. But for me, the ranking goes from I have Will Anderson at 94.5. I have Nolan Smith at an 89. So the drop off for me is not considerable, but it's definitely there.
Yeah, to highlight some of the points you bring up about Nolan Smith, this is a guy I have as my edge 4 position, and honestly I was expecting to have him a little higher. He's gotten a lot of hype recently. He ran extraordinarily well at the Combine. He performed like a true athlete at the Combine. But for me, his athleticism can only get him so far. He is the smallest edge rusher in this year's draft class. Of everyone, not just of these top 5. This is the smallest edge rusher in this year's draft class, standing at 6'2", 238, and he can't change the height. And the weight's going to be hard to change to keep the speed the same, and the speed is what sets him aside from everyone else. As you said, Keaton, he's an athletic freak. Okay, his bend when he gets around those offensive tackles is freakish. That you don't see that from edge rushers ever. I mean, this is like Hassan Reddick type.
Yeah, I
think that's the comparison for Nolan Smith. But I think for me, this is not the prospect I love. He is super fast, but he's just too small. Offensive linemen get faster in the NFL. And Nolan Smith is able to do his thing at Georgia. He only came up with 3 sacks all season. This is a star-studded Georgia line. I know they split sacks. They split everything. But only 3 sacks for Georgia on a dominant defense. 7 tackles for loss. And I'm actually not as high on him in the run game as you are. For me, this is not the best run defender.
But I feel like
because he's too small to defend the run.
But
he is better utilized as a gap-plugging linebacker in the run game.
Which is why...
But they don't utilize him that way. And if he's going to play as a 3-4 outside linebacker, he's not going to be utilized to, plug the gaps. And I think that's where this is not going to be a 4-down player in the NFL. I think he's too small to be a 4-down player in the NFL. I don't think that they will use him except for 3rd-down pass rushes. At least in the first few seasons until he can work on that. He's too easily dominated in the run game. I think tackles stay the same size from college to the NFL, and they get faster and better. And for me, it's going to be, while it's not going to be as hard of a transition for Anderson and Wilson, it's going to be a harder transition for Smith being as small as he is. He's going to have a harder time getting around the edge, a harder time getting to quarterbacks, and a harder time bullying his way through D-lines or through O-lines at 6'2" to stop the run. For me, I do like this prospect. Don't get me wrong. I've got him graded at an 85.71, so almost an 86. This is a good player, and this is a first-round pick for me. But this is a back-end first-round pick because of the potential that is there. Right now, I don't think he translates to the NFL.
I disagree because if you look at the tape, Nolan Smith has been dominant in the run game.
Not always.
You look at what the profile for a good run defender is, either a huge defensive tackle or it's those freakish athletes who are, like Aaron Donald, fantastic run defender. Fletcher Cox, like looking at guys like that, obviously the big defensive tackles, but you need to have that fluidity in your game. Like, you're not going to get that from Tyree Wilson. You're not going to get that from Will Anderson at that level that Nolan Smith gives you because he has that fluidity in his hips, obviously not as big. But, I mean, you look at size. Besides weight, him and Will Anderson are only an inch separated. And, again, size is different. Power is different. But I think the size for Nolan Smith, to me, is not as much of a question mark, especially if he's plugged in as a 3-4. This guy can rush the passer, and is, I think, going to be arguably drafted more for that run stuffing game. I really like him. I think this dude is out and out the best run defender, and I think that where people take his size against him, this is what goes for him in the run game is the size because he has the fluidity that I think a lot of these other edge rushers don't.
Just a small part I disagree. 6'2" does not concern me. Aaron Donald is 6'1", 6'2". Aaron Donald is small in that sense. 238 pounds. It's just not big enough for me. In the run game in college, it might have worked, but he is. I'll give it to him. In the run game, he is a great tackler. He is not going to miss tackles, or not many. He didn't miss very many in college. I don't expect him to miss many in the NFL. But if you put him in a short down situation, say a 3rd and 2, and you line him up as an edge rusher, and he's not upright, he's not going to win. You've got 6'8", 350-pound tackles in the NFL who can't match his speed, but if this is just a halfback dive, just going straight up the middle, they're just going to push him.
But that's the thing.
He's not weak, and he's not.
I feel like you're looking at it wrong because that's true. But again, like I think I agree. I think what we're saying you can use as a pro and a con. Like obviously, that size will matter, but obviously it gives him that speed. And NFL, as much as obviously the NFL tackles are better, they're more fluid, they're faster. There are very few that are able to be at 6'8", 6'7", 300 plus pounds to be as shifty and have the hips like it. Like, I mean, Penei Sewell is one of those guys, and he's not even 6'8".
But that's the difference you get in the NFL. I think there are just so many more tackles that you get.
He's more fluid, he's bendy, so he can use that speed. His get off is fantastic to just warp around defender, warp around offensive linemen.
He can, there's no doubt, and that's why I have him there for the potential. But it's just the second a 6'6" plus, 320 pound plus offensive lineman gets a hand on him, the play's over.
But
if Nolan Smith can get not literally, but if Nolan Smith can get around the edge, yes, you're going to have a hard time keeping up with him. But if he is just slightly off the mark, or if an offensive lineman knows what's coming, because he is, and we haven't talked about this yet, a relatively one-dimensional pass rusher. He has
a lot of these guys are.
A lot of them are, but they have power. So they can use Will Anderson can use his straight arm, and he can put it into a counter move. He can put it into a speed rush. He can put it into a power rush, a bull rush, any kind of rush. Will Anderson, he's not he's not amazing at every single one, but he can use all of them. Nolan Smith can't just bull rush a 6'7" offensive lineman. His first, on almost every single pass rush, his first instinct is to run around the side. And if an O-lineman can see that coming, Nolan Smith has his spin move, which it's actually a really good spin. It's a fluid spin. And it's a second resort. He needs to incorporate more pass rush moves to really be involved in games. And I think a lot of the reason that we're seeing him mocked to a team like the Philadelphia Eagles, who have Hassan Reddick, is because he's not ready to start in the NFL. He's not.
I feel like
he needs to sit and he needs to learn behind someone similar to him, like Hassan Reddick, and he can. I am 100% sure this guy can develop into a great NFL pass rusher. Not right now. He's not NFL ready for me.
All right, we'll take it on to my number 3, Tyree Wilson, Texas Tech, who you have obviously as your 2, so we kind of flop there. But opposite of Nolan Smith, this dude is. I've never seen an edge like this guy. 6'6", 261. This dude's gigantic. That being said, just because of what we just talked about with Nolan Smith, I am gonna not talk more negatively about Tyree Wilson, but kind of bring up what I thought a little bit more. This dude has the most C+ grades I've given any of the pass rushers in my top 5. I think this guy offers you power, and I think that's it. Not a very diverse pass rush, not diverse pass rush moves. He's a bull rusher, and he's a vicious one. This dude is, you can argue. I feel like just because Will Anderson's profile is bull rushing, I guess you can argue Tyree Wilson brings a little bit of power, but I don't understand how Will Anderson would compete against a guy who's 6'6", 261. I think this guy translates much more. This guy's not a pure edge. This guy's a 3-4 tech guy at the next level, a 3-4 edge, and even then I could see this guy lining up in the interior much more, but I mean, violent bull rusher. This dude is a violent bull rusher. But again, I watched his game against NC State, and I didn't love what I saw. Tyree Wilson to me, I was like, okay, I'm, going into my rankings, I was like, I think it's going to be, I knew it was going to be Will Anderson at 1, and I was like, I think it's going to be Tyree Wilson at 3. Or at 2, excuse me. Like, I had that set in my mind, and I sat down and watched him tape, and obviously, yeah, he has a bunch of good stuff. He, an offensive lineman, if you step wrong, this dude will set you on the floor. But I think what I saw a lot from him is if an offensive line was able to get under his pads, he's neutralized a lot. He's not very shifty. He's not the type of guy where if they're running the ball to the other side of him, he kind of gives up. He's not going to go and look for the tackle. That being said, I do think this guy will get drafted higher than Nolan Smith because of his physical profile. We haven't seen one like this. I don't remember the last time we've seen a guy this big as an edge. But yeah, I think besides that, he has great power. He has a good first step. I'll give him that. But the hips are a little tight, not as athletic as the other guys. But again, how can you kind of put that on him for the size he has? I do like him. I think just coming off the Nolan Smith, we were talking about that. They obviously offer two very different things.
I'm going to completely disagree with you here. Tyree Wilson, is my number 2 edge rusher in this class, and I'm going to surprise you with my grade because it surprised me too. I was honestly expecting to have Nolan Smith at my 2, really loving his speed. And then Tyree Wilson burst onto the scene. I've been seeing him mocked in the top 5, top 10
which
consistently.
I wouldn't be surprised, and I'm not.
And I was just confused because I think this is a guy who Will Anderson could have potentially been the number 1 overall pick last year in the draft. We're seeing a lot of Nolan Smith at Georgia this year. But Tyree Wilson, we didn't see a lot of this year at Texas Tech. He had a quiet 61 tackles, 7 sacks, 14 tackles for loss. Very good stats for a D lineman, the second best just behind Will Anderson. And he surprised me. Watching his tape, I saw one of the best players in this draft class. I came in with a grade of 95.24. This guy falls at number 3 currently on my big board. This is a powerful, powerful edge rusher. And he clocked in at 271 on the weight at the combine, 10 pounds heavier than he had previously clocked in. And you're right, he's not as fast as Nolan Smith. It's obvious. He ran a 4.8 240, which it's not slow for a 6'6", 271 pounder. It's not fast, but where I think he does make up for it, 4.82.
Yeah,
it's not slow, but it's not fast. It's in the 21st percentile of edges, but he's also the biggest edge in this class by a margin.
Ever.
Where I think this guy, clearly makes up for it, his quickness. He's not as fast, but he's just as quick as the best. He is always the first to make contact. When you look at these edge rusher versus offensive tackle matchups, the first player to make contact generally wins the rep. Tyree Wilson is able to get one hand on and under the pads of offensive tackles on 99% of the snaps that he takes. The highlights I watched, the scouting, the film I watched, this guy does not lose. Now, it's a Texas Tech defensive line. He's double teamed on a lot of plays. He's able to rip right between two, and his power combined with his quickness just creates someone that you don't want to have to block because you never know what's coming. I think the pass rush moves, it's very diverse. He has the power, but he also is able to counter moves. Once he gets an arm across an offensive tackle, the rep is completely over because no tackle is going to be able to recover when a 6'6", 271-pounder is on the wrong side of them. The second he's on the wrong side, it's over. Second he's got two hands on him, it's just about over. And I think Tyree Wilson does it the best. He is, I have him prolific run defender, prolific pass defender, and for me, it's this guy. His athleticism it stands out. To be 6'6" and not playing defensive tackle, he's got to be doing something right. And I think this guy is a freak at edge rusher. I mean, you said it, the strongest player in this draft class. And
yeah. And again, it's nothing against.
For me, this is a almost generational prospect considering his size.
Yeah, I mean, I like him. I just think he's very, he offers one thing, and obviously it's elite, and we don't see that. But I think, I think it depends on the team because some teams don't need that, some teams do. And again, you can, look at it that way where he goes into the NFL, the obviously the tackles are better. And I think if he were to get, I think I've seen him mocked most to the Lions, which obviously that would be very, very scary. But he's going up against some good tackles. But yeah, I like the Leonard Williams comparison here, actually. And I was going back and forth between that comp just because you don't see guys this big. I've seen a lot of Marcus Davenport. But
seeing Montez Sweat type things. Montez Sweat is faster than Tyree Wilson.
And probably smaller.
But no, Montez Sweat is, I believe, 6'5".
Yeah, that's actually.
But Tyree Wilson is deceptively quick. Right, he's not. He's not.
Get off is good.
He is not going to run a fast 40-yard dash. We know that he's 6'6". He's not going to run a fast 40. It's just not possible. But he still finds a way to beat tackles around the edge with a speed, with just a pure pass rush move, just getting around the edges. That shouldn't be possible for someone at 6'6", 271. But somehow Tyree Wilson makes it possible.
Yeah. We'll move on now to number 4, where we have Will McDonald, obviously out of Iowa State. Big dude, 6'4",
not that big.
239. Not big, excuse me. Slender dude. Here's, and I have to pose this question. If you're saying those things about Nolan Smith, how have you had Will McDonald above him when he's taller, and I think he's the same weight? So where's the... If you have Nolan Smith and he can't translate, how do you have Will McDonald rated higher?
Will McDonald, I actually have, my grading system's a little strange. You'll have to bear with me. I give Nolan Smith a 4 on run defense. It's not out of 10. Don't worry. 4 is actually quite a good score. It tells me he's NFL ready. But for me, I have Will McDonald also graded at a 4 for run defense. I don't think that this is a guy who's going to thrive in the NFL as a run defender. The difference for me is in the passing game, Will McDonald can line up all over the place. I think Nolan Smith is going to be exclusively a 3-4 outside linebacker, where Will McDonald's extra 2 inches provides him, he played 4-3 edge, 3-4 outside linebacker, and 4-3 D tackle for Iowa State.
The thing is, though, and this is what you look at it, Iowa State, first of all, very weird defensive scheme. This guy is in no way this guy is not effective at all in the inside. This guy's a pure... Harold Landry type guy, like bendy, really good. He's the Madden player in us. Like, we like him, like bendy. He's a fan favorite. You can see why. Bendy, really good. Like, he has a very unique physical profile, but he's a pure bend, finesse edge rusher like Nolan Smith. I think they're pretty comparable there. But Iowa State, like, this guy had very minimal reps on the outside, whereas that's what he's going to be. Like, there's no way this dude will be in any way effective against an inside offense.
But I think that the production that he offered playing defensive tackle was 5 sacks, which is more than Nolan Smith, and that's only going to increase when you put him out on the edge. The biggest difference for me between McDonald and Nolan Smith...
We don't know if those 5 sacks were on the inside or on the outside.
No, but
those are both.
For me, the biggest difference between these two prospects is technical ability. Nolan Smith is super raw, super athletic, super fast, and a very good player in his own right. I know we've talked about it. For me, Will McDonald offers more. He's better with his hands. His first, he makes early contact, and it's good contact, and he's able to sort of, push offensive linemen more than Nolan Smith is. He does more with his hands. He does more technique-wise. He lines up in more techniques. Nolan Smith will be solely utilized as an upright 3-4 outside linebacker.
And I think if people
McDonald's going to be able to use other techniques. McDonald will use the 3-tech, the 1-tech, the 5-tech. He'll be able to use more.
Yeah, I agree with that. But I think I think Will McDonald at the end of the day, I think this guy will be more useful as an outside linebacker 3-4 schemed type of dude. I guess he's a little bit more. We just didn't see him at edge that much. Iowa State really, I forgot what the stat was, but he had half as many snaps as all the rest of the edge rushers. But again, the Nolan Smith has really set us off here, just because I really like Will McDonald. I don't want it to get it skewed like that. I really do like him. Another prospect where you look at a lot of other big boards, we're 2 people who have him a lot higher. A lot of people don't have him in the top 5. But yeah, again, really super, and I'm gonna again go back to Harold Landry, a guy who is so productive because of that bend. And really good grip and rip. Again, like Nolan Smith, definitely better hand work against offensive tackles. But again, another guy like Nolan Smith, there's no getting against it. When you're that weight and you're slimmer, I like to watch games. I watch him against TCU, and again, a guy where you see him bend. Either he gets the first step on you and he warps around defenders, or he warps around offensive tackles. Like, he is fantastic at that. But when an offensive lineman can get their hands on him as he's ducking under, he gets shoved to the ground. And again, that's with most defensive edges. But again, it's always that size is a question mark for me. But I think this dude, to me, I really like. I like him at the back end of the first round. But again, that size I think offers a lot. His arm length is great, getting that first hand onto the tackle, which I think Nolan Smith doesn't offer because he's not as tall. But again, I think he's a rusher. Like, this guy is not good in the run game. And again, maybe average. I guess not good. I have him graded a C+ C- in run defending. And again, this guy lacks a power profile. Like, this guy's not a bull rusher, which I think takes away from his game a lot, because he's not getting that straight line to the quarterback, which obviously is the most effective way, which is what Tyree Wilson can do, which is what Will Anderson can do. So I think it takes away from his game a little bit. But again, you're just not going to be able to get that unless you put on 10, 20 pounds, which is almost impossible. I mean, you never know.
It's
true. I think
doable.
it takes away, like, will be drafted for what he offers, which is that bend, which is that speed, which is that ability to get around tackles and get them misstepped. So I really like him, though.
Yeah, I mean, for me, just to wrap up the McDonald versus Nolan Smith argument, I think that Nolan Smith clearly has the higher upside of the two players.
Yeah.
More potential. I think he'll probably get drafted before McDonald because of that.
Definitely.
But McDonald's a first-round prospect. He's one of those guys you know what you're going to get.
I feel like
I think he'll be...
Yeah.
And he may not end up in the first round, but I think for me, this would be a first-round player. And I think you know what you're going to get when you draft someone like this. I think he's going to offer good third-down pressure on the quarterback. And that might be it. I think in terms of production in the first year, maybe match him to someone like George Karlaftis. I know they're very different players. Karlaftis has about 30 pounds on him. But, I mean, in terms of production, in terms of the way they played, I think this is a Karlaftis production-type player for this first season.
There we have it. And we'll move on now. I want to talk about who you have at 5. So we both have at 5. I have Derek Hall at 5. You have Myles Murphy at 5. And we can talk about both. I feel like we might as well just talk about both because, there we go. And I have some strong opinions about Myles Murphy. But let's talk about Myles Murphy first. So, I guess, why is he your 5? Because this dude is compared to Rashawn Gary, Von Miller, and I just didn't see it at all this year. I guess 2022, you saw a little more. I don't think this guy is a top 5 prospect. I think he's barely first round.
Yeah, I think you summed it up perfectly. I have Myles Murphy as my number 5 edge rusher purely based off of talent.
Yeah.
This is, at the start of the season, this guy was mocked in the top 5, top 10 picks. He was up there with Will Anderson, ahead of Tyree Wilson. This guy was phenomenal last year. I think we saw some problems this year, and I don't know why they showed up, but I'm going to keep it brief with Myles Murphy. I think this guy is potentially the second most, probably the second most talented player at edge rusher in this year's draft class. The problem is going to be the work rate. I saw some things. It's just going to be teams are going to hold interviews, and they're going to have to see whether or not he really loves football and whether or not he really wants to play football. And I think if he can figure it out and he can get back to the way he was playing in that 2021-22 season, this will be could be a really dominant edge rusher in years to come.
Yeah.
I think this guy, talent alone, and standing at 6'5", 268, he almost matches the physical prowess of Tyree Wilson, and he's smart. He's talented. The problem is just going to be work rate, work ethic, and whether or not he really wants to be out on that field.
And again, I see it. I saw the flashes. I definitely saw the flashes with Myles Murphy, but I think it's very similar to if you guys saw our last Path to the Draft episode where we talked about Smith and Jigba, a guy who a lot of people have high and we just didn't. I think Myles Murphy is kind of similar there, where a guy who a lot of people love and I just don't as much. I think, again, wouldn't be surprised if he was taken in the first round. I probably would have a late, I would obviously definitely second round, but I think I would have a late first, early second round grade on him, just because I feel like, I don't know, I don't love what he offers at the next level. I think there are a lot of guys who offer more, and I don't think he has that trait that sets him above all of them. Like, he's pretty good at everything, but not elite.
I strictly think that Myles Murphy, if he's there on, if he's there at the back end of the second round or early third round, he is a must take. He's just. I don't see this guy falling past the second round because of the talent. Because of the talent that is just apparent. This is someone you have to take a risk on. I'm sure so many teams hosted interviews with him. If you had a good interview with this guy, this is a talented football player. And he won't just be a role player at the next level if he can figure it out. And he will be, this could be a guy who's consistently getting you 10 sacks a season a few years down the line.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about quickly who I have at my 5, which is Derek Hall out of Auburn, a guy who I was really struggling between 5 and 4. I ended up putting Will McDonald at 4. I love Derek Hall. I think, weirdly, he's like when you look at the pro comp, it's like Will Anderson, kind of. He's a poor man's Will Anderson. They measured exactly the same, 35.5-inch arms, same height, 254 pounds, like very similar profiles. This dude, to me, what makes him stand out is his hand placement. He always gets his hand out first. You look at his ability, and especially against Alabama, if you go back look at the tape there, his ability to get the hand out, bull rush the guy back, was just fantastic. Again, this guy is going to be a true bull rusher. I love his rip to bend kind of play style. But yeah, definitely a bull rushing profile player, which I really like. I think the bull rusher guys in this class definitely I like a little bit more, and the reason I put him ahead of Myles Murphy is just that ability. I think this guy could be a very highly productive player at the next level. Really, obviously jacked, 34.5-inch arms, great height at 6'3", good weight, powerful, can get, speed to power well. Obviously, Will Anderson is the peak of that, and I think Derek Hall is just a little bit less than that. So I think it's kind of a, if you don't get one guy, get the other. Obviously, it'll be Will Anderson. If you don't get Will Anderson, you'll get Derek Hall. But I really like him out of Auburn, a guy who obviously is a senior, so has that kind of maturity that we see. Obviously, also Will McDonald, 24 years old, which,
23, I believe.
I think he's 24 now, if you look it up. But yeah, I really like him. But I think the tight hips a little bit is a little bit of an issue. Not a great run defender. And the tackling I didn't love. I think he misses, and I think he's a little too jumpy. And again, I think he's the kind of guy where he's in the pocket, gets past the tackle. If the quarterback can kind of do a sidestep, and he goes flying. So again, it's all about refining that, being able to be more fluid in the game. So I think what kind of set him back is the fluidity a little bit, where Will Anderson has, I think Nolan Smith has, McDonald has. So I think that's why I would argue Myles Murphy probably has more fluidity than Derek Hall, but I really liked him. I think this dude is a first-round pick in my opinion. I think he will be drafted in the second round. I think that's what his value to teams is. I have him at an 85 grade, and I think just for pro comp, which I think is interesting, I kind of want to hear your reaction. I have him at a poor man's Joey Bosa. I'm not sure how much you've watched of Derek Hall, but I kind of watch the player and I just kind of think in my head. I go through as many players as I can and kind of try and match them. And I think when you look at Joey Bosa, great arm length, great at pushing back. Obviously, Joey Bosa is much better, more refined, much better run defender. But I think I saw some similarities there. Obviously, if Derek Hall pans out to be that good, that would be quite a fine for whatever NFL team gets him. So
I'm sorry I have to do this to you because you did it to me with Will McDonald. But
Here it
is. You hinted at Derek Hall. You really love him because he's got this power rush, and you love power rushers in this year's draft class. So you have Nolan Smith ahead of Tyree Wilson.
Yeah. I'm saying I like the power rush mold a little more because I think they'll be more productive. I think Nolan Smith is a better run defender. Like I said, I think this guy will be drafted to be a run defender. But again, he had those moments at getting to the quarterback, and I think what he offers is that speed, that bend, where Darren Hall is a straight line to the quarterback. So I think they offer different things. I like Nolan Smith more. I like the upside more, and I think he will translate more. Again, I guess you could say, year one, I think they'll be similar. Maybe you could give Derek Hall the edge, but I think Nolan Smith is a more refined prospect, where Derek Hall, I think, lacks a little bit of the fluidity, which I value in edge rushers.